A very good evening to you and welcome to your season review of the 2024-2025 Sky Bet Championship season that sees Plymouth Argyle head back to exactly where we came from 2 seasons ago. Following relegation back to League One, we're going to discuss all of the highs and unfortunately many lows that befell us across the course of the 12 months in the Championship this year, starting, of course, all the way back in May when we appointed Wayne Rooney as the new head coach after that famous win over Hull City, right up to the moment where we narrowly lost out to Leeds on that final day. Let's just see how the evening goes. I am delighted to be joined by 4 of your favourite Argyle Life panellists over the course of the next, I don't know, however long it takes us, however long Sam goes on for, to discuss the highs and lows and look ahead to the summer and what lies ahead. Graham, Adam, John and Sam, you're all very welcome tonight. As always, do get your comments and subscriptions into the channel and all our social media platforms. This is once again a massively interactive show. We want to know what your highs and lows, where did it go wrong, who's to blame, what are the positives to take into the summer ahead of next year. We'll show as many of them as we can. And if we've got time at, I don't know, 1:45 tomorrow morning, when we're just about wrapping up this episode, then we will come to 1 or 2 of your questions. We've tried to keep it a little bit more structured than usual. I have imposed a maximum 5-minute talking segment to each panelist on any given talking point. So Sam will have a timer going in the background if he's getting close to the mark. And that's it. Without further ado, Sam, we normally come to you for a pre-match run through. So why don't we come to you first of all for a season run through 24-25 in the Championship?
I've seen many people across social media, fan forums, etc., describe this as Argyle's most avoidable relegation ever. I wouldn't go quite that far. Quite aside anything else, I think the most recent one before under Derek Adams was even more avoidable when we just decided not to play our best team for no apparent reason at all in the season. So I wouldn't go as far as to say it was the most avoidable ever, but it was very avoidable. It was largely a series of self-inflicted errors, which, when rectified, were rectified arguably too little and certainly too late. The appointment of Wayne Rooney was a failure. I sort of regret not sticking with my day one reaction, which was, oh my goodness, what the hell have we done? Hearing him talk about his tactical plans, the way, the fact he liked these inverted fullbacks and the fact he liked that attacking style perhaps got me slightly wistfully thinking that he was going to be Schumacher 2.0. But clearly, getting him to execute it was, it'd be like if you asked, one of the Union Street drunks to cook you a Gordon Ramsay meal. The drunk cooking it wouldn't be as good as Gordon Ramsay himself cooking it, to use a metaphor. So Wayne Rooney was not nearly as good as implementing Shuey ball and Shuey himself was. There was a very brief period where it looked like it might just work between the first and second international breaks. But it was not to be. As good as that little spell was, it was found out very quickly, and we didn't manage to adapt to the way that teams adapted to us. We had no tweaks whatsoever, and that the mood around the club began to drastically worsen the longer he stayed in situ, and I think possibly he was having some difficulties off the pitch as well. And when the news came that he'd been sacked, it was possibly a mercy for him, and certainly a mercy for Argyle. Obviously, the next appointment was absolutely huge. We still very much were in with a chance of survival. I've seen some people saying it was done and dusted by then. I couldn't disagree more. We were at the end of the day only 3 or 4 points off. It would have been very hard, but I don't agree that at that time it was done, because at least, quite aside anything else, we didn't have a crystal ball. We couldn't have seen that it required such a high points total. If it had required 45 points, which it so often did, we got 46, so we would have stayed up. So it was a crucial appointment. And well, with Wayne Rooney, I regretted getting a bit too excited and deviating from my day one reaction with Miran Muslic. Perhaps quite the opposite. I regret sticking to my day one reaction for too long. My day one reaction being, this guy seems to have a decent CV. He seems very adept, but I think he's the wrong fit for the club. He's absolutely won me over. Over the time of his spell here, he's done an excellent job. His team extrapolated over a season would have us at 57 points, which is comfortably lower mid-table. Still 1 point short of the 58 that Neil Dewsnip said he was targeting over a season. But what's 1 point between friends? And despite that excellent run, it wasn't quite enough. We didn't give him enough, money to play with in January. I'm absolutely convinced of that. We ended up, I think, panic buying Boateng, who, despite fitting all of Muslic's profile boxes, as I've said on this podcast many times before, clearly he isn't quite, ready yet or up to standard or whatever. So the January was a bit of a shambles, apart from Maxi and Katic, who both did very well. We didn't bring in anything like the quality we needed in other areas. But despite all that, he did a very good job. He won me round. The run of form in the final spell of the season from the March international break onwards was exceptional. I think that spell alone over those 7 or 8 games would have had us, I think, top half, maybe even with half an eye in the playoffs. So, yeah, exceptional run of form over those final 7 or 8 games. And just not quite enough because, like I did, largely because of, well, A, because of maybe the lack of squad depth in the other times of the season, and B, because of how well other teams did. But given now that the famous in the knows who tend to, abide Argyle, Twitter and social media have now indicated that Miran Muslic will in fact be staying, despite his, shall we say, slightly ambiguous press conferences. Osman Basic put the tweet out saying we go again next season. Tijani said something about next season. The release this came out the same day. All of the mood music very much indicates Muslic is in fact staying, which I think is great news. And
mood Muslic, surely.
The mood Muslic is that he is staying, absolutely. And I think whilst we are going down, we're going down with hope. And that's 5 minutes
I have
already.
to say,
sorry.
I have to say, if you are playing Argyle Life Bingo at home like Zach is in the comments, and you had Union Street drunks and multiple Stephen Schumacher mentions inside the first 8 minutes, you are sitting pretty. That is some start from the People's Champion.
Gordon Ramsay was a Gordon Ramsay
and Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay gets in there as well. Graham, Sam alluded to it in his monologue there that in some quarters it's the most avoidable relegation in Argyle history. I hate to plant this on you. You've seen a lot more seasons than we have. Do you agree it's the most avoidable Argyle relegation in history?
No. This is my 8th relegation, I think. So the standout was the Derek Adams 3-4, which was completely avoidable. This was avoidable, but too little too late. It started off with the appointment of Wayne Rooney, and I think it was what I call a pendulum swing appointment, because Foster was so bad and disrupted the morale of the club and the staff and the team. Wayne Rooney was seen as a bit of a unifier, and I think Simon said that himself. What they totally misjudged, of course, was his ability to implement a playing strategy that fitted the team and the players that he had. And in fairness, I mean, Sheffield Wednesday was a complete debacle, and I think I kept my head in my hands for several days afterwards. But after that, to be fair, right up until the Blackburn game, I think we were 14th. And many people said the Blackburn game was one of the finest performances of an Argyle team they'd seen for quite a while, and it was fantastic. Last-minute winner by Morgan Whittaker, and then the 2-week international break, and then calamity. From Cardiff, we never recovered. And what the hell happened in those 2 weeks? And then seemingly half the team disappeared off around Europe for a week, that others were playing in internationals. And we never recovered from that Cardiff game. Never. I know Sissoko shouldn't have got sent off, but we were 2-0 down then. It was obvious we weren't man enough for the Championship, if ever there was a game that proved it. And don't forget, Cardiff finished bottom at the end of the season. So the the Norwich and Bristol City results should have ended his tenure. They didn't. They got Mike Phelan in, but as Sam has alluded to, off-field activities were getting in the way, and we persisted until the eve of the transfer window, and which left no time for anybody. I mean, that was a fundamental error from the board, leaving it too long and then trying to get somebody in during a transfer window, which I think Miron had 15 working days, I think, to get his transfer strategy and try.
And there was about 4-5 games in that period of days as well, Graham. Let's not forget.
It was travel, play. I think he barely got the team on the training pitch for 2 or 3 weeks. And when you're implementing a fundamental change in style, which he did, that was a challenge too far. And I'm not blaming the board, because absolutely, as time has proven, he's been the right appointment. He lifted the club's spirits, achieved fantastic results. With the Liverpool came an incredible performance for 70 odd minutes at Man City. Some real highlights, and I know we'll come back onto our chosen highlight a bit later. And he actually gave us hope, and right up until possibly the Middlesbrough game, we felt we had a chance, which we probably didn't many times during the season think we did have a chance, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. But what he demonstrated is character, passion, performance was possible with the players that we had. And that's something that Wayne Rooney could never conjure up out of those players. And yes, some were a bit iffy about the style, so-called hoofball, but as the matches went on towards the end of the season, the transition, the playing up top, players who had previously not been thought of very highly suddenly came to the fore. You look at Mustafa Bundu, what did he do with him? What did he do with Ryan Hardy? Even Tijani. So, yes, it's a relegation, but strangely, I'm really quite optimistic about next season. And I was absolutely devastated at the outcome of the press conferences just before the end of the season. I really thought he was on his way. I mean, it was a completely reasonable interpretation. And here we are, almost in the middle of May, no sporting director, no head of recruitment, no head of data, no seeming prospect of that being announced. So if Miron stays and that situation persists, he's a really impressive man, because that is some task to take on. And it really is over to Andrew Parkinson and the other board members. As we know, Simon's sort of got other things to deal with at the moment. So I'm hopeful for the future, but what an up and down season. In all my supporting seasons, I can't remember so many real highs and so many real lows. It was incredible. And when the story's written about it, it would be longer than Sam's 5-minute monologue for sure.
It certainly would. And who knows, potential soon-to-be award-winning author John Alsop, you may well get the contract for that book. Let's come to you, John. Graham talks about the roller coaster of the season it was. I mean, last season felt like a roller coaster with all the ups and downs, with Schumacher, Sam's favourite, Stephen Schumacher, leaving, and the Ian Foster problem going well, and then, you know, Neil Dewsnip and Kevin Nanscoville, Phoenix from the Ashes, all of that stuff to keep us in the league. We all wanted, I think, if I remember rightly, when we did our season preview pod, we all said we quite fancied a Bristol City boring 15th place finish. Well, Bristol City have put the cat amongst the pigeons with that, albeit that they're going to be probably playing another year of Championship football. How do you describe the roller coaster that was 24-25?
Yeah, when I speak to people who don't necessarily know a lot about Argyle or even football, about, you know, what it's like to support this football club, you could go back to the season before we got relegated from the Championship the last time we were in it. And I believe I'm right in saying that we pretty much had one boring mid-table season in that entire time, right? The season we finished 10th under John Sheridan in League Two. Every other season there has been a serious kind of deep into the season, either relegation problem or promotion push, ending in, either promotion, relegation, or just missing out, or just surviving, as it were. So, it's a pretty high bar, what Graham is saying, that you can't remember a season with this many highs and lows, because we seem to be an unusually exciting football club to support. But I completely agree with it. It's been absolutely insane. Like, in what other world could you beat a team that were at the time, and I think obviously, subsequently this has been punctured a little bit, but at the time you could make the case that they were credibly the best team in Europe, right? All conquering, on course to win the whole lot. And they showed up at home park, and we were the first team this whole season to really give them a bloody nose. Astonishing result. And at the same time, you can go away from home and lose 4-0, 5-0, 6-1, 4-0 again, 4-0 again. And just come away feeling, the lowest you've ever felt at the football. And it's been sort of everything in between, right? It's been crazy. And obviously then you add into the package the fact that, Wayne Rooney, and clearly it was an absolutely dreadful appointment in hindsight. I, like Sam, bought into the hype at one point and will hold my hands up to that, although to be fair, I didn't appoint him and wouldn't have done in the first place. But, it's Wayne Rooney. Wayne Rooney managed Plymouth Argyle Football Club. This wasn't, some kind of horrendous slide into, trouble with a manager like Ian Foster, who no one had ever heard of. It was Wayne Rooney. It wasn't boring. You could say, whatever you wanted to say about it, but it was done in the kind of full glare of the football world's attention, because, one of the greatest players to ever play the game was down here. Had the sort of farce of the circumstances surrounding his hiring, and then you had the sort of, everyone thinking Shuey would come back, and then you get Muslic, and then there's that speech that he gives, which goes viral on the internet, and then you lose 5-0 at home to Burnley, and you think maybe the sort of newfound optimism isn't quite well placed, and then, you sort of think you're down, and every time, that I'd sort of, this is going to be a question that we'll come on to, I think, but sort of in the scheme of this, every time you think you're down, suddenly you just get that little bit more hope that maybe you aren't. It's been, emotionally relentless. And I would have absolutely adored just finishing 12th this season. Not sure who did finish 12th in the end. Wonder if we'll need to do an investigation into that. But it would have been a great place to finish in. And now obviously have to go down and hope that we don't have a boring mid-table season, because that would be a failure. So it's going to be hopefully at least one more year of excitement before maybe we can finally hopefully get back to the Championship and just sort of establish ourselves there. That would be nice. But completely insane highs, insane lows, way more intense on both fronts, I think, as Graham mentioned, than anything I've experienced as an Argyle fan, despite the fact that it's been crazy supporting this club for so many years. This season really was a whole another level of that.
And Adam, I'm going to steal something that Ali Maxwell of Not the Top 20 said going into the Leeds game before the final day. One thing that cannot be taken away from Plymouth Argyle over the 2 years we've been in the Championship is we have had incredible main character energy, haven't we? More often than not, at some point over the last 2 years, we have been front and centre in everything that's entertaining about the Championship, good or bad.
I think that the last few weeks put that into perspective quite nicely. Even with, say, we had that defeat at Swansea. It was one of the worst performances of the entire season, sandwiched in between some excellent displays. I mean, that Sheffield United game, when we're coming to the end, coming so soon after that, when they're in the hunt for the title and we've given them a bloody nose, remarkable. And it's exactly the same sort of thing that happened last season. Like we look at the famous night against Leicester, the final day against Hull, when they were both challenging for promotion. I mean, it is kind of remarkable, really, that we're coming out of this a couple of seasons in the second tier, and nobody at all can say that it was dull. And it's worrying almost that if there's one bad season in about 20, or rather one dull season in about 20, because one bad season in 20 would be lovely, and one dull season in about 20 does not bode well for how well my heart is going to cope with the next 20, where it seems like we're going to be up and down again. But it's just, it is avoidable. It is an avoidable relegation. I don't think we can distract ourselves from that. It's not the most avoidable in the world because, as I think the guys have mentioned, that season 2018-19 under Derek Adams, where we just didn't play our best team for some reason and ended up going down, was ridiculously avoidable. But this one, it's one decision really that has snowballed into a series of poor decisions that have ultimately cost us here. I think I'm going to say there's a fine line. We call ourselves a risk-taking club, which in some way or another is fair enough. There's a fine line between being brave and being stupid. And ultimately, through this, in making that decision, Simon Hallett has made himself look stupid. And it's got us where we are at the moment. And even worse than that, almost, I think that decision at the start of the campaign almost made the club look a little bit pathetic. Almost in a sense of, we need this name to have our identity. We need this name to put ourselves in front of the cameras. When, as you've mentioned, Joe, we didn't. We had that main character energy in the Championship for so long without Wayne Rooney, thank you very much. And to be fair, a lot of that is to Simon Hallett's credit for getting us where we are. So it's a really bizarre one. We've been front and centre of so much that's happened in the second tier across the last 2 years, both good and bad. And I just look at it and think if that one decision didn't happen, we might have a third season in the second tier as well. But we are where we are.
Who'd have thought that following relegation to the League One, we'll all be sat here saying the Championship will be worse off without Plymouth Argyle. Let's get into, and I'm not going to go off on a massive tangent. There are stats to back up the fact that we have been incredibly entertaining in the Championship. Even when we get beat, let's be fair, it's rarely a low scoreline. If we're getting beat, we're doing it in style, particularly this season. Let's kick into some questions then, because we're going to try and keep this as structured as we can. So a random point to start off with. John, why don't you take the first question then? In a fairly torrid, and this is a question for the near 700 of you who are watching already, so do get your shouts in as well while the lads are giving their point. John, what's your highlight in what's been a fairly tricky passage through the season?
My highlight is actually Brentford away. Obviously, I think there's a very obvious highlight that I think someone else will come on to that rivals that one. But Brentford, for me, just sort of, I think, tops it off. Like, personally, my memories of that game are just incredible. You know, the limbs when we scored that goal were absolutely phenomenal. It was just one of those games where, as it went on, you're thinking, we played respectably here, and they'll probably bring on Burmo and Wissa and whoever, and they'll probably win 3-0. And then it gets to the 60th minute and then the 70th minute, and you're thinking, we couldn't nick this, could we? And then we do, and the atmosphere is unbelievable. It was just sort of a beautiful day as well. The sun kind of like setting into that corner of the stand at Brentford with the little nick, and it was just, the light on the pitch was incredible. You have Nance running over in this kind of purple twilight, nearly going on his backside. The incredible emotion from JB and Beidou, who at that point we were so hopeful about. And it was just, a glorious day, and I think a day that the club really needed after what had been an unbelievably challenging time. It also came in the middle of what, if we're going to talk about this being a roller coaster insane season, was like a microcosm version of that over the course of one weekend, right? I mean, we all went into that Friday night being told that, Shuey had returned. It was 1-16 with the bookies, I think, at one point. Rumours going around about how he was just introducing himself to the players at the hotel, and then it would be a 5 o'clock announcement, and then 5 o'clock comes and goes. And I went for a run and then went in the shower. And as I got out of the shower, the first thing I do is look at my phone and see Fabrizio Romano has tweeted saying it's Miron Muslic instead. And then that happens, and we have an emergency podcast, and then we go to Brentford. And then, he goes back down on the train to Devon as sort of an instant celebrity, being offered beers and everything. And then we draw Liverpool at home on the Sunday night, I believe, was when the draw happened. So it was just this unbelievable weekend that I think just sort of summarized in one kind of like little capsule everything that has been so mad about following us over the last couple of years. And it was just, it was a great game. Funny, actually, because at the time, Brentford were really unbelievable at home and terrible away from home. And we were terrible away from home and very good at home. I believe Brentford, saw a stat on Match of the Day last night, have got the most points away from home in 2025 of any Premier League team. And I think have actually gone to pot a little bit at home. So maybe we were the sort of harbingers of that. Who knows? But, obviously we were sort of going into the game with this like expectation we were going to be absolutely hammered by a really, really good side. And we stood up and we showed spirit and character and fight, and we nicked it. And obviously over the whole season, we didn't quite manage to kind of replicate that on a larger scale by sort of achieving the unbelievable and staying up. But I think, at one point it really did look like we were going to go down without much of a fight, and we didn't do that. And I think that game at Brentford sort of typified the fight and the spirit and the never say die attitude that these players have. It was it was a great day out, a great occasion, a wonderful win, and a crazy weekend.
Yeah, I don't think in all the time I've been following Argyle, I don't think I'll ever forget just that Friday alone, just the emotions, obviously with my line of work, following the betting patterns of Stephen Schumacher literally plummeting and snowballing out of proportion in the betting. It was all done. To coin a phrase from this week, it was Habemus Papam, there was white smoke, there was all sorts, and then just the
Habemus Shuam.
Habemus Shuam.
I'd genuinely love to know what happened on that Friday afternoon, because there were definitely not that I'm claiming to be one of them, but having spoken to people who I know honestly trust and who I know were not bluffing and talking at the backside, there were definitely some people on that Friday who knew it was Muslic. So either Schumacher's totally become overconfident, thinking he's got it, and told all his mates in Plymouth he's got it, is one option. Maybe Graham shaking his head, he's not convinced of that. But the only other option I had was perhaps people in the club were deliberately leaking false information to, shall we say, people with big mouths to see what leaked. Well, Graham's shaking his head at that as well. But if it's neither of those two, I'm just amazed how it became known as absolute certainty. Everybody was hinting heavily at it. Everybody seemed almost certain that it was going to be him. I think he was even 1 to 20. I think literally for about a minute before the Romano tweet, and then it was immediately suspended. There's a comment on screen saying Schumacher was apparently told he had the job. I don't know how true that is. It would certainly seem a bit of an odd thing to do when he's not got the job, unless there was genuinely a last-minute change of mind. That's the only other option that it could be. Interestingly, Graham's not shaking his head at that one. I don't know if he knows more than I do, but maybe a last-minute change of mind. Who knows? But yeah, who knows what happened? But that Friday, I remember I was actually working that Friday, and I was just constantly the amount of breaks I took that day to go and check my phone was completely and utterly unprecedented. Very, very odd day that Friday, and one that will live long in the memory.
If Sam's employer is watching, then you're in big trouble.
I've made the time back the year. Don't worry.
Sam, I've actually spoken to Simon Hallett about it.
Okay.
And without breaching any confidences, Miran Muslic was very late entrant into the interview process. I think he was only got told 72 hours before, so he had to come over from Belgium. He had to do all his research, and he arrived with a suitcase and a laptop, and he absolutely smashed it, as you can imagine from what we've seen. And to be fair, other board members were watching online, and he smashed it. And I think the truth is he changed people's minds. Simple as that. And we can see why he did. Let's be honest.
If only there was a fly in the wall documentary going around that could have showcased all of this high octane drama around the appointment process. I wonder if the club ever thought of that across the course of the season. Let's try and keep it structured, as said. Going off John's point then, Adam, Brentford away was his highlight. This snowballs absolutely perfectly into your highlight of the season. I wonder what Sunday afternoon in Devon it could have been.
Oh, God, yeah, it certainly does. And I think I've said it previously on various episodes of this podcast, where I look at the cup run and I almost kind of feel like the fact that it's come in such a season as this, where we've ended up going down, has almost enhanced just how bonkers that cup run was. The fact that
just very quickly, just to jump in, is this not so typical of Portsmouth's FA Cup win? Of all the seasons for them to have won the FA Cup, it was that year. Of all the years for Argyle to have this bonkers FA Cup run, it was this season.
You mean Wigan? You mean Wigan, Joe? Surely.
No, I'm talking about Portsmouth when they had the administration and things, and they had all the problems off the pitch.
They reached the FA Cup final 2 years after they won it. Is that?
Yeah.
They made the final that year, but they lost to Chelsea in the final in 2010. But the year they won it was 08, which was a couple of years before in the administration.
So to answer your question, Joe, no, it does not. It does not reflect this in any way. Would be my response. And sorry. Anyway, on that, yeah, we've got. Let's take stock of where we are at the minute. We've got a Premier League that is remarkably strong right now. We've got Chelsea in the Europa Conference League final. We've got two teams sitting in 16th and 17th currently in the Premier League who have made the Europa League final, and we've got a team in that Premier League that's incredibly strong, that has finished far away from anybody else and won the title at a canter. And in that season, when they were still on for 4 trophies, they came to Plymouth Argyle and they lost the game, and they deservedly lost the game. We put in a perfect performance that day, outplayed them, got the chance that we needed, and yeah, okay, they had a bit of pressure in what was for some reason 9 minutes of added time. No ideas where that's come from. But they couldn't get through. And yeah, so obviously my highlight of the season is that 1-0 win over Liverpool at the start of February. It's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it happened. I don't know if we'll ever see something like that again. And the fact that it's come in a season like this, where we had very, very few highlights actually up to that point, makes it all the more remarkable. And, you know, I look back at it now. I think we all look back at it now, and we've missed out on survival by 3 points and a bit of goal difference. And there's a little bit of a wonder, do we possibly think that the cup run, with the way that it rearranged games, with the way that we had Hull City away, for example, and just days after Manchester City, and ended up going down the way we did, would we have stayed up without that cup run? Maybe we would have. But football, ultimately, as we've said time and time again, is about moments. And that moment against Liverpool, when Ryan Hardy puts the penalty in just a couple of years, or 3 years it would be, after he missed a crucial penalty against Chelsea in very, very similar circumstances in the FA Cup 4th round. Honestly, it's very hard to beat, and probably will be very hard to beat for a while. I remember him stepping up for that and genuinely thinking, he's also against to score this. That what we've seen in the past from Hardy in this moment, it's not for him at all. And he delightfully proved me wrong, sending a keeper who'd already saved a penalty from Kylian Mbappe this season the wrong way and getting us the win. It was the sort of Sunday afternoon in February that I don't think we're going to experience again, and one certainly for me that I'll remember for the rest of my days. And as I say, the fact it came in such a highlightless season makes it all the more absurd. And maybe we would have stayed up without it. It doesn't make me any less delighted that it happened.
It was certainly a Sunday evening and night that I'll certainly not forget for a while, including my very first ever trip to the Dolphin, which was quite an enjoyable experience. Sam, in and around the Liverpool game, after the highs of Brentford and Liverpool came your highlight of the season. Probably not one that everyone would immediately jump to, but just tell us what your highlight of the season was.
Yeah, you've described the timing of it. It's not a game, I think, you know, if you probably polled 100 people, I think this one would come up maybe once or twice, if that, maybe even zero. But for me, it actually, I think, genuinely was my highlight, just because it was a pure moment of emotional, cathartic release, I would say. And that's the 2-1 win over West Brom, which was Muslic's first win as manager. It was the end of a 15-game winless run in the league. Obviously, we had the Brentford win, of course, and it was an end to a run of 1 win in 20. And I think to understand why that game was so wonderful, I think you have to understand the context around the game. And by that, I don't just mean the run as I've just described. I mean also the immediate context, you know, before the game. You have to look at the fact of obviously the 3 home games in a row, Oxford, QPR and Burnley, whereby the performances started mediocre and got progressively worse and worse. And then there was the famous moment where I said I'd do the pod in drag if we won at Sunderland. We didn't win at Sunderland, but we came damn close. And I think that was, as Miron Muslic so aptly described it, that was the game that showed signs of life in Argyle. And I think that game, as much as any, will be pivotal in our season. But as with all pivotal games, they're only pivotal if they do result in a good thing coming from it. And that West Brom game absolutely categorically was that. And I think it was almost made better for the fact that, as a spectacle, was made better for the fact that the first half was actually quite a poor performance. First half, we were very static, didn't really get going at all, and we were perhaps slightly fortuitous to go in nil, not massively fortuitous, we still defended pretty well, but slightly fortuitous to go in 0-0 at half time in that game. West Brom brought on Malumbi, who obviously had the famous chant, Jason Malumbi. They were singing about him, the in your head chant, that now seemingly, as is the case with all good football chants, now every club has their own player for that chant, as happened with the Will Griggs on Fire one. That's just the way these trends go. Every player now has the version for that chant. So they brought on Malumbi, and the West Brom fans gave it a loud, rousing round of that song. 5 minutes later, Malumbi scores to put them 1-0 up, which I think at that time was again just about deserved for them at that point in the game. Not enormously deserved, but just about deserved for them to be leading at that point in the game. And there they were singing the in your head, Malumbi. And obviously then we had our moment at that point, whether that woke something up in us. We really threw men forward within 2 or 3 minutes of that. There was a penalty, I think it was a handball, and Hardy slots it in. And just by pure serendipity or pure chance, it was the one player we had whose name slightly fitted that chant, and we sung it back to the West Brom fans, to Hardy, to wind them up a little bit, which soon shut them up. Hardy then laid on what would have been a beautiful assist from Obafemi, who just didn't quite get the shot right. And it was one of what Joe mentions, those classic 15-minute spells that even if we've not really showed up for the rest of the game, where one of Argyle's 15-minute spells that we have, where we just absolutely blow a team away. And obviously the Obafemi miss was a close run thing. And then Hardy himself dances through the defenders, slots it in for his first open play goal in a very, very, very long time. It was a lovely finish. And then obviously it was the song rang out even more. And what a moment for Hardy. It was a redemption moment for Hardy. It was a redemption moment for Argyle. Ryan Hardy, who, as we have both said, me, Joe, and many others, has been every step of the journey with us. We were all gutted to see he was going such a long time without a goal. Some of us were even starting to question our very long-standing faith in him very slightly. And no, not even a little bit, Joe. Okay, fair enough. And he won us that game, and that was like the first step of a long road of improvement. Well, I'd say technically the second step of Sunderland was the first step, like I said, but the very big second step in a long road of improvement of getting that win done and getting Ryan Hardy back on the miraculous form we saw from him in his new best position as a wide forward. And to top it all off, at full time, Argyle played Zombie by the Cranberries at full blast to send the West Brom fans home even more. It was just what football was all about. It had the banter, it had the winding up the opposing fans a little bit, it had the individual success, the team success. It was the pivotal moment in the season. I can honestly talk about that West Brom game all night, and I better not do so, otherwise Joe might boot me off the call. But that's my nomination. What a game!
And it's amazing how you managed to turn that highlight of the season into a full match run through, as if it only happened yesterday. Graham, Sam talks about everything that football should be. Great entertainment, crowd are up, winding up the opposition. This was something we did particularly well in this lunchtime kickoff, wasn't it?
We did. My highlight, Sheffield United 2-1 win on 12th of April, which ironically was the same day the previous calendar year we beat Leicester in that famous win. First half, I won't give a rundown of the whole game like Sam, but first half we were fairly even, Stephen, and then Rakasaki turned better inside out and bent it in the corner. You thought, oh God, here we go. And then one of my highlights of the season happened in the very first minute of the second half, when Joe Edwards ran and absolutely smacked into Mike Cooper, who wondered what the hell had hit him, and the referee didn't see it. Amazing. Totally unsettled Cooper. And from then on, the crowd were really up for it. And I think that second half performance against United was our best half of the whole season. We really, really got into them. And what I loved, we stuffed it right up Chris Wilder, who'd been rather derogatory about Argyle pre-match. And we know what happened afterwards. But if you remember the first goal, when Barley turned inside, I think on the touchline inside out. So it was the first sign of proper transition play. Got a fantastic cross in, ball came out, and I think Hardy bundled it in. Oh, sorry, that was the Tijani goal. Hardy scored, but the real issue was the crowd were really as one as we were against Leicester and Hull. And that was really one of the first times in the season that, apart from the Liverpool game, that I felt that. And it got us over the line, but it really gave hope. If you remember, we were 4 games to play, 12 points to play for, and 4 points to gain on the opposition. So it was a game that gave us hope. And it came after that absolute debacle at Swansea, only a few days before, where you thought, that's it. And then typical Argyle, they raise hopes and optimism. And what I can say, and one of the real highlights of the evening was actually down the Dolphin, Joe, with the Sheffield United fans, none of whom could believe we were where we were in the table. Loved the club, loved the atmosphere, loved the city, and really wanted us to stay in the Championship. And I just wish that we had, for that reason, because we are well loved all around the Championship. And it's such a shame that we can't do it next season. But it was the Sheffield United game, for me, epitomised the ups and downs of it all, and really what Plymouth Argyle is about. When we're on it, we're on it. And that game epitomised us at our best. And I loved it.
Absolutely. And one of the things you touched on there, Graham, was one thing that has come across quite a lot this year when you watch all these match day vloggers and you read social media, which is difficult not to do these days after every game, is just how much people have enjoyed coming to Home Park in the last few years from Championship clubs. I know it's probably because most of these clubs haven't been to us in a long time, but that's the highlights done. We thought we'd start on a positive note. We're going to take a little bit of a turn now, but we're going to come back to positivity later on. So do stick with us if you're here for positivity, because it will be coming. We might be able to rattle through these next couple of points fairly quickly as well, because there might be some agreement going on. Adam, I'll come to you for the first one on this one. At what point across the season were you concerned about the direction of travel that we were heading in?
Probably the 22nd of May 2024, if that helps. So when news first broke that we were going to hire Wayne Rooney, and a couple of days later we actually did. It for me, it feels like the time relegation was signed, sealed, and delivered when we hired someone who's clearly incapable at this level. If I am to look at it for when the hope really drained out, because obviously you've got to have a little bit of hope, and there was a bit more hope when, albeit belatedly, we relieved him of his duties. I look at the Derby home game, which was 2-2 going into the latter stages. It was one of those where really neither side was on top. It could have gone either way, and they got the moment at the end rather than us. You just wonder if we had the luck in that game, and we had that moment at the end of the game, and got us to well, I think we'd have gone above Derby at that point. Then we'd have obviously had 3 more points. They'd have had 3 fewer as well. It's those sorts of things. There's countless sliding doors moments. One very, very obvious one before the season even began. But I think that one for me is just when I looked at it and went, yeah, it's not going to happen, is it? It's we're just fighting the elements here, and I don't think it's going to be. Which, yeah, was a real killer. And to the team's credit, we did all we could from there. As Sam mentioned right at the start, that run actually from post Derby after that international break was almost playoff form, and a real credit to the lads for putting that fight in. But we'd very much left ourselves too much to do. So on a massive level, I think hiring Wayne Rooney was the only nail in the coffin we needed. If I'm just giving it a specific game of where we're going to end up this season, it's that last minute against Derby where it just didn't go our way.
Feel free to jump in now, lads. With if you've got something different. When were you? What point did you get concerned?
Yeah, you said the hope is fully drained is coming later, isn't it? Then get concerned. I mean, yeah, I'm sorry to give the boring answer. It was obviously the appointment. Having briefly been carried away for the whole sum of about 2 or 3 weeks. I guess the next one would again, another boring answer, would just be the first day of the season. I guess that was the minute where all the, who knows, I'd managed to sort of kid myself and thinking, who knows, this is so crazy, it might just actually work for a prolonged period of time. And then to go to Hillsborough and get so utterly embarrassed, utterly humiliated, as we did, was kind of a bit of a moment of, oh, maybe it's not so great to hire a manager who, being so bad last season, was the main reason we actually stayed up. Maybe hiring a manager with one of the worst CVs out of any manager in the EFL 72 was actually a pretty bad. Maybe I was right in the first place. Maybe it was a bad idea. And I think he never really fully regained my confidence after that. I was briefly sort of semi back on board in the run-ins between September and October with 3 wins out of 5. But as John will testify, as I said it in a group chat with him, there is still quite a strong part of me that thinks we'll look back at that and the season as like a random spell when we were weirdly good, and that did turn out to be the case. We didn't recover from Cardiff. Possibly something happened within the team psychologically. Maybe it was just simply more tactically a case of teams figuring us out and us having no plan B to that. But for whatever reason, that spell between Cardiff away and his sacking was really, really not pretty at all. The only 2 good performances in that entire cluster from 19th of October to 1st of January. Honestly, but there were, I know we beat Pompey, we didn't play very well. Just one of those games where it was 2 poor teams on the day and one just edged the other one out. The only 2 good performances in that entire cluster were Sheffield United away and Middlesbrough home, which we got 1 point out of a possible 6. Should have been at least 4 with how well we played in those 2 games, if not even all 6. But then I guess I was maybe not even back on board, but vaguely considering coming back on board. Feeling appeared to have made a positive impact, and then the Coventry and Oxford shambles. The less said, the better. So at all those moments, I was concerned. I was very concerned about Muslic at points. I'm not going to deny that. Anybody who's heard me on this podcast will fully know that. I was very concerned about him after Burnley home. I was extremely concerned about him after Sheffield Wednesday home. That was when I made my statement, to rival my Sunderland one of, if we won the next away game, I'll go in the nude. And we did go and win at Pompey, didn't we? I wore a dressing gown. I didn't want us to get demonetized or struck off YouTube or anything like that, so I did have to slightly cover it up with a dressing gown, but there we go. And I was increasingly concerned after Swansea away that we'd put in another dreadful performance, but he's won me really, really round, and that's
Sam, with respect, Sam, if you itemize a list of all the times you were concerned this season, we are going to be here until midnight.
Well, we went down, so I'd probably been right to do it, yeah.
Yeah, you were right. I remember just quickly when you said to me, Sam, in a group chat when I was defending Muslic, that I had been horribly wrong about both Foster and Schumacher. And I said, well, there's 2 ways of looking at this. Either you are incredibly prescient about managers, or you're a knee-jerk reactionary who doesn't give them enough time. And I would be right eventually. And I guess we know how that one.
Yeah, well, that's true. Right? That's true enough, I guess.
Can we just try and comprehend the fact that we asked tonight for 1 point on each question, and Sam has just rattled off about 17 moments in the season where he was concerned. John Graham, are there any left?
Yeah,
are there any moments left where you were concerned?
I'm going to sound a bit like I agree with Nick here, because I do actually agree with Sam and all these 16 or 17 points. But there was one, for me, it was the consecutive losses at Norwich and Bristol City. That was the defining moment. That was the time the decision had to be made, and it wasn't. That was the low point for me. Yes, the Norwich performance, Sains, the left winger, was outstanding, but the tactical ineptitude versus Bristol City, Victor Paulson at right back against one of the fastest wingers in the Championship, was just unbelievably tactically inept, and that was it for me. And that weekend was my low point, and time for him to go, but it didn't happen.
John?
I was, as the resident happy clapper, probably concerned later than most. Yeah, I mean, I did think, like, what the hell are we doing when we appointed Rooney? But I then sort of bought into it a little bit. I felt that spell of games in September gave him a bit of breathing room. I actually didn't feel that we sacked him too late at the time. I certainly agree with Graham that he could have gone after those 2 games, but he did go, and I did see a world in which the decision could not have been made, right? I could see a world in which Hallett had turned around and said, well, we've just appointed one of the best assistant managers in football history to come and work with him. We're not just going to throw that away after 3 games. There were signs of life against Sheffield United and Borough. Obviously I was concerned, through this whole period, every time we got absolutely pasted, but I didn't think it necessarily was terminal. And the fact that we managed to go through that awful run of form and still be very much within touching distance of survival was pretty incredible, really, rather than being cut adrift. I think that I lost all hope really after Derby at home. I think that will be. But Adam's already done that. Yeah, but Adam's already done this, Joe. Adam's already done this. Why don't we just consolidate these 2 questions into one? Because that was. I think that was like. I think for me it's the same answer.
When did you? All right then, John. When did you resign yourself to our fate?
After Derby at home. But I think this really up to then. Like, I really believed that we could do it. And after that, I was like, no, we can't do it. And yeah, obviously all those wins that sort of followed that raised my hopes a little bit. But after that Derby game, I never got to the point where I was like deeply emotionally kind of like invested in us staying up. It just felt to me like all those wins were a stay of execution, and so it proved. But I was pretty, I like to, well, I don't know. Apparently I've turned into the resident pod happy clapper. And I did actually want to come back to an earlier point on this, because I didn't get to have my say on it, if I may be permitted 2 minutes, about this being the most avoidable relegation ever. And I think I really strongly disagree with that, because I think you could definitely make the case that hiring Rooney was the most self-inflicted, stupid, needlessly risky decision that we could have taken. I completely think that's a fair thing to say. But ultimately, we are a club with a low budget at this level that has not managed to get investment in the whole time we're in the Championship yet. This sort of presupposes that if we hadn't hired Rooney, we'd have hired someone as good as Muslic or as good as Shuey, and not someone who might have looked like a good hire on paper, but who did badly. And I think that that's just not guaranteed. I mean, there was a lot of speculation about Paul Heckingbottom at the time, right? Paul Heckingbottom nearly relegated Preston, who have a lot more money than us, and they're a lot bigger club than us. How many points did they finish ahead of us? 3 or 4 in the end. That's a significant underachievement. And by the way, they did it by looking absolutely fine for the entire season, and then falling off at the end. So we don't know how the season would have played out. We could have ended up on exactly the same points total after hiring Paul Heckingbottom or someone like him, doing okay for 5 or 6 months, and then just falling off a cliff like we did under Derek Adams in that League One season and going down. I think it's a real counterfactual to assume that if we hadn't hired Rooney, we would have hired someone really good who was going to do a great job. There are a lot of bad managers out there. I may have been wrong about Rooney. I did say that we should absolutely not go anywhere near Paul Heckingbottom with a 10-foot pole, and I think I've been proven correct in that take at least. Ultimately, we were always fighting gravity at this level to a certain extent. And it was, any relegation is avoidable unless you get a 30-point deduction. So it was avoidable, sure. But there have been way more avoidable relegations. Both the other clubs that went down with us were far more avoidable relegations than ours. Luton in particular, having been in the Premier League last season. So I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much about this. Obviously, it was one insane decision didn't help, but I don't necessarily think that like the season as a whole would necessarily have gone any better if we'd hired someone else. Either they'd have been a disaster and like Rooney was, and we'd have sacked them and brought someone in who may or may not have been good, but may or may not have been Muslic, or maybe they would have done slightly better and kept their job for longer, but it might not have been enough over 46 games. I think it's just hard to know. So yeah, I think for me, I say this now because like it's relevant to the question Joe just asked. I think because I think that like I've got this reputation among our group chat for being a little bit of a happy clapper, but really it's just because my expectations have been lower this whole time than others have. I think my expectations were we'll do bloody well to finish 21st again this season. Ultimately, we nearly actually achieved that in the end. So I don't necessarily see this as some kind of apocalyptic disaster that we've gone down with 46 points, even if yes, again, avoidable mistakes were made on the way to it. So I think that I was pretty much taking the rough with the smooth more so than others, and it was really only after that Derby game that I felt we were sort of cooked completely.
Now that John's hijacked my running order, although he will blame Adam for it, there's a lot of blaming going on this podcast tonight. We don't want to be put down as a blaming podcast. Sam, when did you resign yourself to our fate?
I always try and work in percentages and probabilities rather than certainties because, who would have thought Leicester would win the league?
You're sounding like a TalkSport interview with Simon Jordan now.
Well, okay, yeah. I always kind of said consistently that from Derby, scratch that. Even going back to like February and March, you would very often say what percentage would you put in it, and it would always be somewhere between maybe at the lowest about 5% and at the highest about 10 to 15%. I was always thereabouts that level. After we lost at Middlesbrough, I think I was maybe a little bit below 5%. Bizarrely, the game that I think we didn't do a podcast directly post Middlesbrough, did because it was Easter. So I was about that. Then I was about 3% because that was a loss we really could have done without a loss. Bizarrely, the moment I sort of dropped close to or below 1% was actually after a win after Coventry home, because every other team won that day. I think one might have drawn, but I think one team drew and I think everyone else won. And at that point, when we did the maths on it, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, because Derby and Hull are playing each other. Obviously, Cardiff, fine, they're dropping like a stone. We need to come above 3 teams. Derby and Hull are playing each other. Everyone else is out of sight. So that means we can't come above both Derby and Hull. And there was that horrifying realization of, oh my goodness, if Luton win one game, that's us done. And then came the even more horrifying realization of, hang on a minute, Luton are the only kickoff on Saturday. And there was that drop in the stomach moment where we actually realized we could be, not officially, but goal difference notwithstanding, there was that drop in the stomach moment where I realized, oh my goodness, we could be relegated going into the Preston game. And of course, that was exactly what bloody well happened, wasn't it? I was in a pub in Preston, the station pub, near the station, funnily enough, near the railway station, the station pub. And yeah, that
Sam's being paid per mention of the station pub, apparently. So
that goal going in a memory I'll take with me for a very long time. Being in that pub surrounded by Argyle fans, the mood was
what pub?
Yeah, the station. It was a very, very, very weird moment. And as I said on the pod immediately following Preston, when I was operating from a Blackpool travel lodge room, that I will never remember a feeling quite so surreal as going to a 3 p.m. game, having been effectively relegated in the early kickoff. And I hope that's a feeling I'll never have again, because it was a very, very, very weird one indeed. But it was after Coventry, just because I knew at that point, even if we won both games, which, let's be clear, was unlikely and turned out not to happen, that even if we won both games, Luton winning one of their 2 remaining games would sink us. And at that point, I just thought, after the Coventry game, I kind of thought at that point, if it was the analogy I used was, if it was an American election now, I think CNN would be projecting it after those Easter Monday results. And yeah, so it turned out.
Just for the interests of fairness and balance, there are other drinking establishments in the Preston area, and other hotels are available in Blackpool. We already
And other
know
American
Adams.
broadcasting corporations, I assume.
Yes, exactly. There are other fake news corporations available for our friends on the other side of the pond. Now that we already know Adams, as John's mentioned, Adam gave his earlier. Graham, just I don't know whether you said it in your last piece. Just
No,
remind us
didn't.
when you
Just a
resigned yourself to your
one-liner.
fate.
Post Middlesbrough after that penalty.
Yeah. Let's not talk too much about the penalty decision because I still haven't really got over it. John rolls his eyes, but we're not going to have an end of season
No.
ref watch. We don't need to. So with all that in mind, Graham, did you ever believe it could have been done towards the end when Miron got us going? Did you firmly believe it?
No, not firmly, no, because the odds were against us. But I do remember, I think Leicester won 8 of their last 9 games to avoid relegation in the Premiership. And I can't remember who the manager was.
Nigel Pearson.
Yeah, Nigel Pearson, that's right. So it's possible, and it had been done before. And post Sheffield United, I thought it was game on. But the stars weren't aligned for us, in truth. I mean, that Luton goal and the manner of it was an absolute body blow. Why a keeper comes out to 18-yard line, whacks his defender in the head, the attacker miscues a shot, and the defender, all he's got to do is kick it past the post out for a corner, and he contrives to put it in his own net. What a goal to go down by. What a goal. So actually, in truth, that was actually the lowest low point of the season, that one moment, because it killed all hope. But yeah, I had hope post Sheffield United, as I said, but it wasn't to be.
Adam, John, Sam, did either of you three really believe it could have been done? The Great Escape? Could Miron have genuinely pulled it off? And if you did believe it, when did you think it was going to be done?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'll not answer the second part because I didn't. I mean, yeah, I never thought it was more likely than not. And if it was ever going to happen, then Miron Muslic seriously would have been a miracle worker, particularly, as has been mentioned, with the points total that it eventually took, which is, as always seems to be the case for us, a little bit higher than it is on average. So the odds, if we're going to use Sam's percentages analogy, which I think in this occasion is fair enough, they were never in our favour. I was never more than 50% that we're going to stay up, that's for sure. Across any part of the campaign, I should clarify.
I think the only part where I might have deeply just dipped above 50% was following the Blackburn game of that good spell under Rooney. Although I said I wasn't fully won over, and I still maintain I wasn't, we were 14th at that time. So I was kind of thinking, well, we could even drop down to 19th, 20th, 21st and still just have enough. So I think at that point I may have just edged above 50%, but immediately following the Cardiff and Millwall back-to-back games, I was right down below it. And as much as Muslic put up a very good fist of getting it to a higher percent than it perhaps than it had any right to be, he certainly was never enough to take me up to or above 50%. I think the highest I probably ever was maybe after the Millwall 5-1. I think I got to very close to 50-50 at that point, if not pretty much bang on 50-50. But I never, never, apart from those 2 moments, Blackburn and Millwall, I guess, those two aside, I was never considerably above 50. I was maybe at most sort of on the line. But I always felt we had a chance up to that Coventry game. The other results just killed it that day. Because then when I sat down and did the maths, I thought it's just going to require such an extraordinary permutation.
I am a definitional quibble with the term Great Escape, and certainly do not believe that you can say that after Blackburn at home in September we were on for a Great Escape, because it wouldn't have been at that point because we were doing fine. like puts me in mind of the discourse around Wolves fans saying we've had a great escape this season when they've managed to finish above 3 of the worst ever teams in Premier League history, who all got about 12 points between them, and that, Herrera deserves respect or whatever. So I think it would only have been a great escape if we had done it after that Derby game, because I think you can't just like stay up from appointing a bad manager or, whatever. If it's 2 points or 3 points, it's not a great escape. I think if we'd done it after that Derby game, it would have been just because of, how congested it was down there and how they were a direct challenger to us for survival. So after that, I didn't ever really believe. I wouldn't say I ever believed in the great escape for that definitional reason. That being said, I really thought we'd stay up after the Millwall 5-1, which Sam just mentioned. I felt that we looked so good that night, and obviously it followed on the heels of the Liverpool game as well. And it was an important game, wasn't it? Because, so many people had said it would be so classic of not only Argyle, but like any club to have this big scalp in the FA Cup. And then, you go into your next league game and have such an after the Lord Mayor's show, and you get kind of taken to the cleaners. And obviously Millwall, I think, were on fantastic form at the time. So it was a really eye-catching result. And that was when I thought, this team, Muslic has sorted this team out. He sorted out the defence. This team has serious balls, and I think we're going to do it. Also, you're looking at that point at a run of fixtures coming up after coming through a very difficult run of games where you have teams in and around you. And obviously, we didn't manage to capitalise on that, on paper, easier run. I guess, like, after that Derby game, like I said, I didn't ever have hope we would do it after that, really. I did actually say, and it was quite funny because I was listening to Not the Top 20, and they said, when they were sort of assessing teams' survival chances, just look at Argyle's run and it's the worst on paper. This is really tough for them. And obviously, like, as outside observers, that's totally a reasonable thing to think. But that was like the only sliver of hope that I had, actually. It was like, not only under Muslic, but also under Rooney, all of our good results in the whole season came against the teams right at the top of the league for whatever reason. And I don't think it's a stylistic reason necessarily, because, we played completely differently under Rooney and under Muslic, but there was just something about those games. And then, obviously, I think Muslic's kind of style did help, right? It was clearly well tailored to situations where we saw less of the ball and were able to just kind of defend deep and work in transition. That was like the only seed of hope that I had, I guess. Actually, weirdly, I was like, this difficult fixture list probably is like the thing that could actually work in our favour. And it actually proved that way. But it was, as I suspected, even when I had that sliver of hope, we'd just given ourselves too much to do at that point.
We did. And as it turned out, our fate was sealed officially on the final day, but we all know it was pretty much done before a ball was kicked at Preston North End. So that's it.
The station.
In the railway.
The station.
Sorry, the station. On that point, then, we are going to be back in League One next season. Obviously, for those of you who are aware, the playoffs are currently happening. Do take an interest in both League One and League Two, as they are applicable to us next year. We are back in League One and all the delights that comes with it, none more so than the Virtu Motors Trophy, which, of course, as a podcast, we will be heavily supporting and endorsing. I will not be doing a single one of the match preview or review podcasts for that next year.
I think Dan Ellard's already booked those all out in his diary, I think.
Excellent. Fantastic. Dan will be hosting, this will be news to him if he's watching, but Dan will be hosting our special Virtu Trophy podcasts next year. But what this summer gives is the chance for the club, the board, the management, the players, and us as supporters a chance to reset. We get to go again. That's what we did at the last relegation, following the aforementioned Derek Adams relegation to League Two. The club reset. They went again, and we came back bigger and stronger. What's the one thing, Sam, that the club need to get right this summer to put us in? One thing, Sam, that's your point. One thing that the club need to get spot on to give us the best possible chance of returning to the Championship at the first time of asking.
This may surprise a few of you who've listened to me over the past few weeks, months, and it's back the head coach, because he's the best asset we have. That's it. It took him a long time to win me over, but I think he did win me over. I think a lot of the stuff he said in his press conference, as much as maybe we can debate his full motivation for saying it, maybe we can debate whether it was the wisest or best thing to be publicly slamming your employees like that. but I don't think he was wrong in a lot of it. I really don't. I don't think he was wrong in the sense of, you know, stuff going at glacial pace, certainly. You know, I know that he made a comment about not having sporting director support, and Parkinson made a comment which was maybe a bit of a barb, you know, come back to that about well, we've had these people helping with recruitment, whatever. He was certainly correct in the vast thrust of it. He was absolutely correct in the vast thrust of what he was saying, that we've not, the football side of the club, I want to make that quite clear, has been a bit of a shambles for 18 months. Usual caveats, very good stuff going on with Brickfields, with youth development, with commerciality, sustainability. We're never, touch wood, under Simon Hallett, we're never going to be a Sheffield Wednesday club. We're never going to be a club who doesn't pay the bills. We're never going to be a club who, you know,
very harsh on the team that finished 12th in the Championship this season. I can't believe you would say something like that. Incredible.
Whatever. We're never going to be that club who is in existential danger under Simon Hallett's stewardship. And I feel like I have to caveat some of my criticisms of him with that, because Argyle have had owners who have done that to us before, and I want to make it clear that all criticisms of Hallett have to be proportionate to that, because you'll never be as bad as the owners we had from sort of 2009 to 2011. All of that being said, the football side of the club has been a bit of a shambles, and I think Miran Muslic just aptly called that out. Now, like as I said at the start of the pod, all that, I've not got this as a credible quote on record from anybody, all the mood Muslic, as John put it, seems to be that he is staying, that he sat down with Simon, he's had his agreement based on all the, you know, statements being made on social media, based on the retain list, based on the fact we're going to Austria, of all places, for pre-season, which is where he is. He's staying. We know this. Even though it's not been officially said by anybody, we now know this. He's staying, certainly for the start of the season. Goodness knows if he gets an offer midway through. But I think we've clearly said enough to him in that meeting that he's decided to stay. As I said, I've had many criticisms of him. I'm not going to totally walk back all of them. I'm not going to get out. That would be unrealistic. If you ask me, in my absolute dream world, are Argyle playing this style of football? My answer is still going to be no. But if we are going to play this style of football, I can't think of anyone better to execute it than him, and I can't think of anyone more likely to get us back up to the Championship at the first attempt than him. And yes, that includes Schumacher, before some smart Alex, shall we say, says it in the comments. Yes, I do believe that now. The aptitude he showed in that run from March to May, the March international break to Leeds game, that 8 games, whatever it was, has won me over on him as a coach, won me over on him as a communicator. And you know what? The style of football has certainly become a lot more enjoyable to watch as well, for my reckoning at least. It's less Ainsworth at Wickham and more Rob Edwards at Luton. So he's won me round in a big way. Clearly, Simon Hallett has seen enough merit in what he said and what he's done that we've made the promises to him to give him what he wants to an extent. Let's just back him. We in theory should have a lot of money to spend, because there was a lot of money that we didn't spend in the August window. I think it's pretty much open secret. We had Beidou ready to sign on deadline day, but we didn't get it done in time. Then there was the cash injection that Simon Hallett said he would front up whilst waiting for the new investors. There's the profit we made from Whittaker and Gibson that we didn't in January, for whatever reason, elect to spend. So in theory, we should have money in the pot. And that's before we even reckon for money that might be coming in by new investors. So we absolutely should have that. The sporting director, I think, is a matter of days away. Reading between the lines, the sense I'm getting is that it's somebody has accepted the job and they're working a notice somewhere. Maybe I'm wildly wrong on that. That's the sense I'm getting. Head of recruitment can't be too far. We've managed to persuade Miran Muslic to stay for the start of the season. Let's just persuade him to stay throughout the season. We need to sharpen up the footballing department. New sporting director is on the way. New head of recruitment is going to follow on shortly behind. We're going to give him a big budget, hopefully. Let's just get renewed offers on the table to Bundu, Randall, Hardy, even Mumba, even Talierov. Are all 5 of them going to sign them? No, but if even 2, 3, 4 of them do, that's certainly better than none of them. And I think we've got every chance of getting back up at the first attempt. I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong, and I've said it now. So to go back to my 1-sentence summary to keep just about within the 5 minutes, back my coach, he's the best asset we've got.
Feel free to jump in, The rest of you, what's the one thing
Sam,
that we need to do to ensure a swift return?
yeah, I think the key word is recruitment for next season. And as Sam has alluded to, we have never been in a better position for cash to pay for transfer fees, enhanced contracts, extended contracts. We've never been in a better position. And yet we find ourselves in that position without the decision makers to make it. And let's not forget, Neil Dewsnip left effectively the same time as Wayne Rooney. So we've been several months without a inverted commas sporting director. So there's been plenty of time to appoint one. Jimmy Dickinson has been known to be going to Bolton for some time. He's been on gardening leave. Ross Goodwin's gone back up to Scotland.
Graham, it can't have been known for so long because Alan Nixon only reported the story today.
Exactly. That's how far he is behind the curve. And that was can I just say, that was one of the worst journalistic sentences ever. To call Jimmy Dickinson a spy, I mean, in football terms, that was unbelievable, Jeff. But anyway, so no sporting director and no two top jobs in recruitment at a time when you've got the greatest funds and you've got players wanting to extend their contracts or sign new contracts. It's a real difficult time. And I actually don't share Sam's optimism for a swift appointment, because if somebody's on gardening leave, I just look at Bolton. Bolton recruited a sporting director from Standard Liège who has finished his job this weekend and yet has been able to speak to Stephen Schumacher about the plans for next season. It's been able to recruit a new head of recruitment. So unless this is somebody really special that is unknown to us, I struggle to understand why the club cannot announce, we have made an appointment, we're unable to confirm who that is, but we will be able to do so at such and such a date. Why can't they do that?
Well,
Why
I
can't
think
they do
that comes to communications going down the pan in general, unfortunately, last year or so.
And I mean, the head of recruitment, can't underestimate the impact of those two going. Everybody say, oh, the recruitment's been shocking. But we've just talked about how much money have they made for the club through player recruitment and player trading.
A lot.
We're talking of millions and millions of pounds, probably in the end, double the gate receipts per season. That's the measure of it. And we haven't got anybody, seemingly at the moment, to put that strategy together. Miron's on his own. I mean, he's got two, Osna Basic and Eddie Latimer are really good people. They're top people, but they can't do all this. I mean, Miron, I'm sure, will have people he knows who he'd like to recruit, but who's actually going to do the talking? Who's doing all that at the moment?
Well, perhaps it's our mysterious sports consultant who's
I mean, it's an open secret who that was.
Well, yeah.
Is. And frankly, I'll say it now, I'm really surprised that the club would consider working with him, given the comments he's made publicly. So I'm not in the optimism camp for the moment, because the silence is deafening, and all of this could have been smoothed over with people at the club working together. Miron didn't have to do what he did. He could have said, I've spoken to Andrew Parkinson and we agreed on the strategy of the future. I still do not know whether he's here for next season. Do any of us really know that he is? Has he said anywhere, see you in July?
Technically speaking, he's contracted to be
of
here
course
for the
he's
next 3 years.
contracted,
So from the club's point of view, they have him as their manager. They've got nothing to worry about.
I remind you, Ian Holloway, contracted, met in a motorway service station miraculously. He went. Ryan Lowe, contracted. Stephen Schumacher, contracted. It
Yeah,
doesn't,
I get it.
it
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything until Miron says, I will see you in July and I'm looking forward to it and starting the season to get us back in the Championship. We haven't had that. Has anybody seen those words?
No.
No, I don't think he has. I don't think he has to say that.
Well,
I think because
why not?
Because he
John, given what he said before, yeah,
but he didn't say like I'm going to. He didn't say I'm going to.
I don't like seeing pictures of his children in Argyle shirts, and him not saying "see you next season." I just hope and pray that he is, and I commend him for being so. He will get offers. His agent will be putting his name around just in case, because he will get offers, particularly in Europe, and we will be. Then where will we be? We need a statement. We are in a vacuum, and yes, I know players are away for the next 2 or 3 weeks, but we're in a stage of status of whatever it's called. We need to clarify what's going on.
Pre-season starting earlier as well.
Andrew Parkinson's statement only added fuel to the fire. It was a shocker. It was a real
pre-season. Just very quickly jumping in on your point there, Graham. Pre-season, of course, will be starting earlier this year because
absolutely.
League One and League Two starts before the Championship and the rest of it. So
the players are back in 6 weeks.
If I may quickly jump in with 2 points. One is that, whilst I do, think that there has been a bit of a sea change over the past week or so with all the factors I mentioned indicating he is going to be staying, even if he's not absolutely outright said it. I think that could just be put down to communication being a bit unclear. And look, I want to be clear, football is a very fluid industry, things change. And even if he's had this handshake with Hallett or, virtual handshake, if they're clearly communicating online, they're not in the same country, but, whatever, even if they've had this agreement to stay, even if that's been put in writing somehow, obviously, if a club comes in and offers the requisite compensation and he wants to go, there is still obviously a chance he could go. I'm not, but and by the way, that would still be the case even if he did come out and publicly say he's staying, because things do change very quickly in football. But that all notwithstanding, even if Graham isn't as sold on the kind of mood music for Muslic as perhaps I am, that just strengthens the point of what I'm saying doubly or trebly so. He is the most important asset, and let's do all we can to keep hold of him above and beyond what we've already done. So, and the second one I want to make, and this is quite important one, once the communication's absolutely gone down the pan over the past year. I want to be clear, that actually wasn't to do with the quality of the communications department within the club, who I think are all good at what they do in terms of the quality of writing and are good people. But I think that clearly what the club are allowing us to know, what the club are directing the communications department to do, that has gone completely down the pan, I'm afraid to say, because we used to get a lot more transparency than what we do now. I mean, like Graham said, everyone who has even the hint of a contact at Argyle knows who this person is, who's our sporting director. None of us have yet said the name, but it came up in the comments of our pod last week. But why when it's such an open secret that this person is our interim sporting director? And I know that perhaps the argument will be, no, it's not him, it's his consultancy company. Why is he not had any kind of announcement at all? Perhaps the reason why is the very fact that you alluded to, that he's had a controversy over some of the remarks he's made. But there we go. The lack of transparency coming through the club is poor, in my opinion. For the last 6 months, it has got worse, and I do think that, again, not a slight on the communications department, who I know that a lot of whom I've spoken to personally, and a lot of whom I like personally, and who I think are broadly good at their jobs. Certainly in the content they create is fantastic. The amount of information they are being directed to divulge is seemingly getting lesser and lesser, which is a worry for me.
Am I allowed to say anything positive?
Do you want to?
Am I allowed to be positive or optimistic, or is this?
I was going to say, John and Adam, do you want to try and?
Well, I was being positive by saying that I thought Miron had agreed to stay, but now Graham slightly poured cold water on that, so maybe I'm now less positive. Go on.
Right, I read my 2 cents on this is I read less into his press conference remarks than probably others here did. I think it is a tale as old as time.
Is that because you're a happy clapper?
No, it's a tale as old as time for managers to use press availabilities to put pressure on owners, which, if he has had some kind of deal with Hallett, and stress that we don't know that for sure, seemingly has worked. I don't think he ever said, if I don't get X, Y, and Z, I'm leaving. He dodged the question into like whether you'll definitely be here, but he never said it outright. And so from his point of view, I don't really see why he needs to come out and say, I've thought about it and I've decided I'm staying, because that would be to acknowledge something that he hasn't publicly acknowledged before. I don't think there's anything that is publicly unresolved here necessarily, unless you really did read into those appearances that he was 1 foot out the door. I think there's a reasonable reading of the press conference, but I don't think it's the only one. And my personal reading was that it was much more likely that he was trying to put pressure on the board to do things that he wants them to do. And to be clear, that need doing. I agree with what he said. I do share. I share Sam's view on the communication at the very high level of the club not having been good enough. I think we talked about that during the Rooney debacle. Maybe it's got slightly better since then, but it's still a bit lacking in my opinion. And I think clearly, on the football side of things, there are things that need to be ironed out. I also think that we are going to be in a position, probably, and again, this is not complacency. Obviously, we've all seen what has happened to certain teams that have got relegated in recent vintage. Rotherham and Huddersfield, did not do very well this season in League One. It's not going to be a gimme, certainly not. We are also, for the first time in a long time, going to go into a season, I think, probably as one of the favourites for promotion. Even the season that we did go up from League One, after what was a surprisingly very good season under Lowe and then Shuey the year before, we were being tipped to finish 10th, 9th, sort of mid-table. We did not have a budget that was, supposed to be able to challenge best team that League One has ever seen, and the team that finished 12th in this season's championship. We were not considered to be in that same bracket. So it was an incredible lift to be able to do that. The previous year, a certain podcast that's already been mentioned said that we would go down from League One because we got rid of Frank Newblade, Ben Reeves, and Will Aimson. Obviously, we ended up finishing 7th with 80 points. Next season, we're going to be and then obviously we've been in the Championship for 2 years, where we have been among the poorest clubs without the resources to really, I think, make a convincing fist of staying up here and sort of actually consolidating. We're going to go into a season where the expectations are totally different. And actually related to the point of me allegedly being a happy clapper, as Sam will attest, in that early part of the season under Lowe, when we went down to League Two and we started faltering, I was furious because I felt we shouldn't be there. And our job was to get back ASAP and correct the relegation from the previous year. That was the last time, I think, that we've gone into a season with expectations that lofty. The good news is, obviously that then presents perils and pitfalls. And if you don't meet those objectives, things can unravel. Also, though, we are going to be in the position where we don't have to overachieve to do well next season. I think that to me is clear. I think if it's going to be the first season in a long time where we are not having to ask a manager of ours to substantially overachieve the level of budget, substantially overachieve expectations to get to where we want to be. Now, of course, there's maybe a big difference between finishing 4th and finishing 2nd. We'll have to see who spends money in the summer. Cardiff, and Luton coming down. Obviously, Luton are going to have parachute payments from the Premier League still. They're a big club. Cardiff, I think, could go either way of being a club that make a real fist at coming back or spiral into complete chaos and finish lower mid-table. It's very hard to tell, but, they are a big club and they're going to, at least they do have some resources they can mobilise. Again, it's not going to be an easy league. It's also a league, though, that is losing Birmingham and Wrexham, who are unbelievably well-backed clubs that you would have expected to challenge again. We'll see who comes up out of the playoffs, but there are some teams in there where if they don't go up, I wouldn't necessarily fear them too much next season. The need for us to overachieve to meet our goals is going to be a lot lower. We are going to have a competitive budget at that level, investment or not. Obviously, we need to be able to spend that money well, but it's much less high stakes than in the Championship, where if you don't spend the money well, as we found out, on too many occasions in the last year, that just puts you at a huge competitive disadvantage. You just have to be so smart about your signings. Going down to League One, we can probably afford to pay what for the level are quite high fees for players, with more certainty that they will probably be good enough for that level because it's going to be easier. We're also going down, and I think this is actually really, really important. We were going to be going down where the vibes are quite good. I mean, obviously the sort of off-pitch stuff with Miron's comments or whatever that has created some uncertainty, obviously, and maybe some friction. But we're coming down after winning a number of games in a row. We're not Rotherham. We didn't go down with no fight. And I think that's really significant. I think that losing is Sam's often said on this podcast, winning is a habit, losing is a habit as well. And I think we are managing to go down, actually having sort of seemingly learned a new system very well with a head coach who's very talented. We'll see if he stays. I think he will, but obviously that's not set in stone. I think back to that low season where we all had that horrible relegation under Derek that shouldn't have happened. We all went to Crewe on the opening day of the following season. The away end was completely full. It was absolutely bouncing, probably one of the best Argyle away atmospheres I've ever experienced. We won 3-0. That season wasn't all plain sailing. Obviously, it ended in extremely bizarre fashion, but we did manage to get up. And I think if that season had reached its conclusion, we would probably be the one the league will come second, because to me, I think we looked like we were sort of on track to be one of the best teams, if not the best team at the end of that season. So, vibes. And then obviously that set us on this amazing journey we've been on for the last few years. Things can change. They can turn around very quickly. I think this board have proven that they have what it takes to be able to, whatever mistakes they've made in the last couple of years, have proved they're able to have a setback, learn from it, and actually back a manager at a lower level to be a big fish at that level and get us up. And I don't see any reason that can't happen again. And this time next year, when we are soaring up with 100 points and the team that finished 12th in this season's championship because of one man who is clearly about to storm out, are going in the other direction, and we're overtaking them and waving nicely at them as they go down. Everything will be right in the world, I think.
Marker created at 1 hour, 30 minutes and 27 seconds for Aaron to produce a TikTok that will go viral in the coming days of John making an early prediction for next year. Adam, is there anything else you want to throw into the mix about what the club needs to do in this reset through the summer?
Yeah, and to be honest, I agree with so much of what's been said over the last 3 hours. And I think the key word for me in getting this all together is decisiveness. Being decisive with the decisions we've made and we're going to make, because that has not been the case at Argyle for too long, quite frankly. We look at the season we nearly went down, 23-24. There was a lot of umming and ahhing in Ian Foster, and he was just about sacked in time. Any later and we'd have gone that season, I'm sure of it. This time around, we weren't quite so lucky. We sacked Wayne Rooney too late. We didn't make a decisive decision, and we left ourselves too much to do. And I agree with a lot of what's been said about the positions that clearly need filling. I want them to be filled quickly. I want to hear something in the next week or two about a plan that we're gonna fill those positions, and we're gonna get ourselves on track. Because I have every reason to be optimistic if we do that. The fact that we're coming down with the vibes as they are, the fact that, as John's mentioned, we're going to go into this as one of the promotion favourites, should give us a lot of cause for optimism. And we just need to be decisive to get that right. And we do need to decisively back the head coach as well. I know we broke our transfer record a couple of times in January. I'll say now, I want to see us break our transfer record again in this summer, because we've got the money for it. And we've got the head coach who I think can make the most of it. So let's make a decisive decision. Let's do that. I want to see in the next 6 weeks before the players back a whole host of decisions made that are positive, send us in the right direction, and crucially are decisive, as I keep mentioning, and are made swiftly and get us into the position when they're back in that 6 weeks' time is where we want to be. If we do that, there's absolutely no reason, as John said, we can't find ourselves here in a year's time, celebrating and thinking, Christ, think of where we were a year ago as we were coming down. That's there for us. There's a chance, opportunity knocks. We have to take it, and we have to take it now.
Some rally cry, that, wasn't it? Absolutely agree as well. There can be no dithering over the course of the next 12 months. This is absolutely crucial that we get this right now. This reset has to be as swift and, to use that word again, as decisive as it was all the way back in the summer of 2019 when we recruited Ryan Lowe to get us up into League One. John?
Just quickly, I saw someone in the comments saying that we're not going to hit the ground running because we have a total rebuild. I don't accept that we have to have a total rebuild. Yeah, there's going to be staff members coming in, but it's not like we have to hire a new manager. Again, possibly a walkout, who knows? But it seems to me like I sort of see things Sam's way. I think he probably is staying, who has spent months drilling this kind of system into the club. That is a huge advantage. Player-wise, we've got almost everyone is under contract, right? There's only one player who I think is really, really crucial for us to retain, who is not. Houghton as well, I think, would be a fine player to have, but Bundu is the one who, I think we're going to be looking at very carefully. I would imagine, is going to have offers from elsewhere. But I really think next season it's, no one individual is going to be bigger than the club. Yeah, there'll be other players that have interest as well. Also, there'll be players who are under contract who I suspect probably won't get a ton of interest, who I think are quite good. I think that there's no reason to think that our keeper and back 4 or 5 or whatever system we play next season is not going to be made up of players who are mostly here now and have been drilled in this system for the last 6 months. I don't think this is a case where we're going down and half the squad is out of contract and we're going to have to completely build it from scratch. Yeah, there are going to have to be key additions because players are going to leave, but that happens in every transfer window. So, of course, there are backroom roles to be filled, but to me that constitutes building rather than rebuilding, because it implies that, the project is completely on the floor and gutted and we need to start again. I don't think, assuming that Muslic stays, I don't think that's the case. I think it's building on foundation that we put in place this season, but too late. And if that's the case, I don't see any reason we can't hit the ground running.
Absolutely agree. That's all my bullet points covered on the season review podcast. So that leaves it to hand over to you guys for any other business from the season review. Sam, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, couple of things. One of which slightly self-indulgent, one of which is helping out fellow Argyle fans. I want to say a big congratulations to our regular host Aaron Hockin, who completed the Plymouth 10K today. Ollie in the comments said it was a half marathon. He's building up to that. It was the 10K he did today, but congratulations enormously for that. And for our podcast contributor Dan Ellard, who's done a marathon today in Copenhagen, completed that one today. It is this afternoon in Copenhagen. And the second thing, now that we've got our sort of praise of our own host and panelists out the way, is a message I was sent on Facebook regarding somebody who's requested that we give this one a shout out, and I'm delighted to do so. But I think it sounds like a great idea. There is a new book coming out from Paul Hart, formerly of Argyle Legends. I think he is himself a bit of an Argyle legend at this point, and now Forever Green, by Paul Hart and Morgan Foweraker. I'm sorry if I butchered that name. Sorry, Norman Foweraker, beg your pardon, Norman. They've written a book together called Green Hearts Forever. Obviously, presumably a pun on Paul's name, basically following their story through supportership of Argyle, the devotion for Argyle. And I think in the summer that would be a very good thing to read. It is available in the club shop. It's not a club produced book, but it's presumably affiliated somewhat with the club, and it's on sale in the club shop. So if anybody's passing by the club shop and wants some summer reading material, there is that one. That sounds like a great book, and I look forward to reading it myself.
And thirdly, the Station Pub in Preston has a very reasonable deal on Madry. Make sure that's the Station Pub in Preston.
Absolutely agree. And I'm going to throw in one final congratulations and good wishes to Kevin Nanscoville, Sam, Matt, Pilgrim Pete, David Ray, and all those at Plymouth Argyle and Classic Builders, whoever it was who did their skydive this afternoon. Nance has tweeted this evening a picture of him in the air with a very fetching pair of yellow glasses on, it has to be said, coming down from a great height. I am on the Just Giving page at the moment, and currently of their £5,000 target, they have raised £6,425 for St Luke's Hospice. That page is still open. If you did want to get across to Nance's Twitter or social media, I think Argyle put it up on the website, of course, with many members of staff doing it. And you do still have time to donate, no matter how big, no matter how small it is going to a fantastic charity within the city in St Luke's Hospice. So massive congratulations to Nance and the team for doing it. They have a set of knackers on them that I would only dream of possessing, because I just about can get the legs to climb up into an aircraft, let alone jump out of one. That's it. An hour and 40 minutes. It's a lot quicker than I thought it was going to be. Nearly 1,300 of you have joined live at a peak audience tonight. We're incredibly grateful. If you are joining us halfway through and you have missed tonight's episode, you will be able to catch it on YouTube and all the usual platforms. For our audio listeners as well, I presume Aaron's putting this out as a pod. I hope he is, because I've just told him he is. That should be with you at some point this week, I'm sure.
When he's had a chance to rest his legs a bit after his
he's had a chance to rest his legs, but I don't think he needs his legs to put a podcast out, so he should be okay. all that leaves me now is a little bit of self-indulgence for myself, because that's my last podcast of the season complete. I am not on next week's award show. So on behalf of myself, just want to thank everybody for joining us throughout the year. It's been a quite bonkers season, bringing you the podcast. Loved every single bit of it. And don't worry, I'm not going to Innsbruck in the summer on the preseason. So I'm going to leave that to Aaron and Sam if they want to do it. I think John's also putting his name in the hat for a little trip.
Do you know how much? Do you know how much the club are charging?
I do not, Graham.
£3,000.
Well, I will certainly won't be going as part of the club package. Then, if I go, I'll make my own way there and just go to the game and forego the dinner there.
You can fly to Munich and get the train from Munich to Innsbruck.
Or possibly flying to Vienna might be slightly cheaper, but one of those two for sure.
If only we knew somebody, Graham, who works in the aviation world, who might be able to point our Argyle Live panelists in the right direction.
If only. I'm going to have a word with him.
There you go. So on behalf of myself, thank you very much for joining me throughout the season. It's been great fun. I will be back next season, probably in the season preview podcast. Whether or not I'll be hosting next year is whether or not Aaron wants to come back and do it, or whether he's enjoying his panel role. But it's been great fun, and we will be back next week. Aaron will be back with the team. It's the annual award show. Get out your popcorn and your glasses of fizz. The black ties will be out for the 2025 Argyle Life Awards. That is coming your way next
this time, unlike at the FCAs.
Indeed. That will be with you next Sunday. Of course, we couldn't possibly bring it to you next Saturday because that would clash with the 2025 Eurovision Song Contest, which is very popular the Argyle Life parish. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been a fun season. It's been a roller coaster season. It's not ended how we wanted, but let's hope 25-26 we can sit here in much better circumstances. Graham, Adam, John, and Sam, thank you very much for joining me. They will see you all for the podcast awards. I will see you next season. Keep smiling. There's always next year.